Good evening and welcome to the Cottage Grove Planning Commission regular meeting for October 25th, 2021, which begins at 7 p.m. Start with roll call.
Commissioner Britton? Here. Commissioner Fisher?
Here.
Commissioner Frazier? Here. Chair Kambata?
Here.
Commissioner Knable?
Here.
Commissioner Rasmussen? Here. Commissioner Wright?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next, I'll look for approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
A motion to approve from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Wright. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on. Item 4 on our agenda is open forum. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience to speak on behalf of an item that is not already on tonight's agenda. If there is, and I just want to emphasize, not already on tonight's agenda, there will be time during the open forum for each of these applications to express any questions or interest you may have in that specific application. At this time, if there's anyone who wishes to speak on behalf of an item that is not already being discussed tonight, you may step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we will move on. Item 5, Chair's explanation of the hearing process. The Planning Commission is a voluntary advisory group to the City Council. One of the Commission's functions is to hold public hearings and make recommendations on land use and zoning matters. The purpose of these public hearings is to provide an opportunity for each applicant and citizens to present information, ask questions, and express opinions. Since these proceedings are televised and recorded for the public record, anyone wishing to speak must step to the podium and give their name and address before addressing the Commission. Staff reports are prepared and provided to the applicant and Planning Commission in advance of these meetings. The first step in the hearing process will be for staff to present a summary of the report. The applicant will then have the opportunity to briefly explain the proposal and provide additional information or comment. Anyone wanting to speak in favor or against the proposal will then be heard. Upon completion of the testimony, the hearing will be closed to the public comment. The Planning Commission will then discuss and act on the matter. 2 complete agenda packets are available for viewing on the back table. Please do not remove these items. The City Council will act on the agenda item 6.2, 61 Marine and Sports Building Addition, at their meeting on Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. Agenda item 6.1, 80th Street Crossing, 6.3, Glengrove Industrial Park 9th Edition, at the meeting on Wednesday, November 17th, 2021. And agenda item 6.4, Cottage Grove Logistics Park, at their meeting on Wednesday, December 15th, 2021. City Council meetings start at 7 p.m. Moving on to item 6.1, 80th Street Crossing, case PP 2021-069, with Mike Morosla presenting.
All right, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. As the Chair just said, the first item on the agenda tonight is 80th Street Crossing. This is a minor subdivision and preliminary plat. The applicant, Cottage Grove Investment LLC, is submitting an application for a minor subdivision and preliminary plat of the subject property located at 6990 80th Street South, as shown on the image on the right here. A little background, the facility was constructed in the 1950s. It is currently a multi-tenant shopping center and an automotive repair use. As you can see on the screen on the right, Ace Hardware is the primary, oops, I apologize. Try that again. Primary tenant as part of the multi-tenant facility is Ace Hardware. And then on the standalone building here is the Honest One Auto Care, and then there's a multi-tenant facility with Pizza Hut and a couple other users in there. Little background also on the subject site here, it is a legal non-conforming use, as the buildings are within a 75-foot rear yard setback to adjacent residential. You can really see it back in here. That's a property line, and there is single family residential there. So the site is non-conforming existing. The application in front of us tonight is not increasing the non-conformity of the existing site. In 2016, the City Council approved a redevelopment plan for the subject site, which included a gas station facility, a new auto repair building, and then a redesign of the existing multi-tenant facility here. However, this project did not come to fruition. No plats were recorded, no resolutions were recorded. So as part of this application in front of us tonight, the applicant's proposing to create 2 new lots of record. The 2 new lots of record are conforming with the zoning code. The minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet or 2 acres. It's 2 acres if adjacent to residential. So the principal lot, the larger lot, lot 1, is 2.88 acres, and the interior lot, lot 2, is at 1 acre, which is consistent with the minimum standards. And again, the minimum lot width is 100 feet per lot 2. This is approximately 151.1. And this side here is 419 feet. It's also very important to remember, as part of this application, there is no site improvements proposed. This is just a subdivision. So no exterior modifications are proposed and can be required as part of this approval tonight. With that said, that completes my presentation. We're recommending that Planning Commission approves this minor subdivision to subdivide the existing lot into 2 lots of record. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, sir. Does the applicant have anything they'd like to add to the comment? Looking like none. Any questions from the commission regarding the presentation or the application? Okay. Seeing none. Commissioner Rasmussen?
Real quick, I seem to remember some parking concerns on this property, and I think I read in the report right, there's going to be a shared access agreement as part of this split. Is that correct?
That is correct, Commissioner. As part of the conditions of approval, the applicant is to submit a cross-parking, cross-access, and maintenance agreement. That agreement will show that applicants or patrons of either businesses can park in the lots and not be individually per parcel. And then, there's an echo. Then also maintenance too of these accesses as they'll be driving through potentially the Honest One site. And yes, so there's a number of easements that we have to review as part of this application.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Okay, at this time, we will open it to public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application may do so. Please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we will close public hearing. Further discussion from the commission? So I've got a question. We're getting feedback. Is there any way to?
We have to close the door, please. Feedback.
In subdividing this lot, does this help promote further development, or is it strictly just for ease of the owner's operation of the property as 2 separate parcels?
That is correct, Chair. The owner of the multi-tenant building is proposing to sell outlot or lot 2 to Honest One, as they would be then in charge of the maintenance and the property going forward. If they want to do any future additions or modifications, they can do it on their own and not be part of the overall development.
Okay, thank you. Further questions or comment from the commission? All right, at this time, I would look for a motion.
I make a motion to approve the preliminary plat, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
We have a motion to approve, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Fisher. Further discussion? I would just like to say that it seems pretty straightforward. Makes sense from the property owner's standpoint. If there's no further discussion, at this time, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. On to item 6.2, 61 Marine and Sports Building Addition, case CUP 2021-072 and SP 2021-073 with Emily Schmitz presenting.
Excellent. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. As you indicated, the next item before you is an application received by Marine 61 in Sports. It is a conditional use permit and site plan amendment. For those of you who aren't familiar, 61 Marine and Sports is down in the southwest corner of the city, just about at the intersection of Manning Avenue and Highway 61. Marine 61 in Sports currently sells and maintenances boats specifically, as well as other recreational vehicles and equipment. They do operate under an existing CUP, which allows for the operation of a legal non-conforming use. The use on the site is not currently permitted within the B1 zoning district, therefore that CUP is required to continue that activity on the site. The applicant this evening continues to see growth in their business operations, therefore are looking to expand a 40 by 80 foot addition to one of their existing buildings, so adding on approximately 4,000 square feet. They'll use this space as showroom space for their expanded use. The architecture for the expanded, or the addition I should call it, onto the existing building would align with the architectural materials that are on the existing buildings on the site. In the past, as the applicant has continued to grow their business with additional amendments to their CUP, it's been clear that additions to buildings that are not directly at the public right-of-way or visible from Highway 61 are not required to maintain that Class 1 material. This is one of those instances where it's kind of hidden in the back of the site, therefore the Class 4 material is supported as a part of this request. And finally, I just wanted to make note, a condition of approval. As the applicant has continued to expand their business, recently within the last handful of years, they have purchased some additional acreage from the adjoining property owner. The deed has been recorded that deeded this additional acreage to Sumac Properties is the legal property owner. And as a condition of this approval, we would require that the 3 parcels that this particular applicant has acquired and expanded over time be combined into one parcel, so all of his activity is taking place on one parcel that he owns. So with that, I will leave the recommendation in front of you. I am available. I believe also the applicant is available if you have any specific questions for him.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant like to add anything? No? Okay. Additional questions or comment from the commission before we go? Commissioner Frazier?
Emily, I guess I have a question for you about, I know one of the things that was referenced in the staff report, and then it's also a condition, is about the landscaping on the property. If you could just touch on that and why we're adding that as a condition.
Yep, and I would say I'm continuing it, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, just to be sure that the applicant is maintaining the existing landscaping on the site. I know he recently did some upgrades to his landscaping right at the front of his building, so I know he is maintaining that, but it's helpful to be able to fall back, for lack of a better way to say it, to make sure that these businesses are keeping up their appearance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other follow-up questions? Seeing none, at this time, we'll open public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application may step to the podium. State your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we will close public hearing. Further questions or comment from the commission? My main objection to this application with ongoing development was that it was 3 separate parcels, so I was happy to see that they're reining in the requirement from one of the previous applications, which was to adjoin these 3 parcels into one parcel ID number. So with that, I was pretty happy with the application overall. Seeing no other comment, I would look for a motion.
to approve, subject to the conditions stipulated in the staff report.
I have a motion to approve, subject to the conditions stipulated in the staff report from Commissioner Britton. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Wright. Further discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item 6.3, Glengrove Industrial Park 9th Edition, case PP 2021-055, with Emily Schmitz presenting.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, me again, here we go. The next item on your agenda is a preliminary plat request and application actually submitted and received by the city. For those who are not familiar, this vacant parcel is located just at the southwest corner of 95th Street and Jamaica Avenue within the city's business park. The smaller of the parcels is an outlot owned and maintained by the city. The larger of the parcels is privately owned by the Wegg family. The proposed preliminary plat expands the existing outlot owned by the city. I should clarify that outlot is currently owned by the city and maintained as a stormwater pond. No other function on that parcel aside from managing stormwater. So this particular plat, as I mentioned again, would expand that outlot and then create a Lot 1, Block 1, which would be available for future development. The specific need for the replatting of these particular parcels is to actually expand the pond, and I'm going to use these funky names for these ponds, but those engineers have these weird ways of naming things that no one can ever remember, but TGP 14 is the existing pond that sits on the outlot owned by the city. So with our increased stormwater requirements, we kind of have to treat more water, for lack of a better way to put it. So by expanding this particular outlot with the plat, we're gaining some additional area to treat more water. So we'll be able to expand that pond. In order to expand that pond, we do have to take some material out of that parcel, and we're going to move it to the existing parcel where you see I have labeled TGP 16, which is another stormwater pond. But given we're expanding TGP 14, TGP 16 can be filled in to create some additional space on this smaller industrial zoned or guided parcel. So it gives it a little bit more flexibility as we look for potential development in the future, making it a little bit more shovel ready, for lack of a better way to put it. So again, by taking and expanding TGP 14, we're allowing for some additional stormwater maintenance within the business park, and we're also creating a more potentially developable parcel in the process. So with that, I will leave the recommendation before you. Staff is available for any additional questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions or comment from the commission? Commissioner Frazier.
I got another question for you. So typically, I know when we see plans in front of us to develop a lot, that's when we'll see dedications of outlots and usually go to the city for these stormwater ponds. And this one, we're kind of doing it in reverse, where the pond is being expanded first, and then we're looking for development. Is that just to make it a more marketable at the time we're trying to help out this property owner, basically?
Sure, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Frazier, this pond is actually existing and was created with the first edition. I don't know, for those of you who realize, this is the 9th edition of the Glengrove Industrial Park. So that pond was created as a part when the business park was first created, so it's already there, for lack of a better way to put it. And it's my minimal understanding, and if you would like some more detailed information, I know we have engineers available, but this pond supports development in the area, is my understanding. So it's not necessarily chicken before the egg, and maybe Amanda's itching to give some additional information. So Assistant City Engineer Amanda Meyer will provide some more explanation.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So, excuse me, a part of why this parcel hasn't been as shovel ready is it's actually pretty short on material. So as part of excavating our enlarged P14 will actually be over excavating the pond to kind of mine some extra sand that we can use to build up the remaining Lot 1, Block 1 to make that more developable. There was a concept site plan previously drawn up for the site. That's kind of what we're using as a baseline to create a developable parcel, looking at potential loading dock scenarios, non-loading docks, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Additional questions or comment? Commissioner Rasmussen?
I've got a question regarding funding and who's paying for this. This being a privately owned parcel with a city-owned lot, and we're expanding, is it a shared expense, or is it on the city or the property owner?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Ryan Burford, our Public Works Director and City Engineer. I'm dealing with more of the big picture side of it, so that's a good question for me. It's kind of a shared cost. So this pond is in our plan. So we collect stormwater area charges to pay for the expansion of it. That's consistent with our stormwater plan. In terms of adding fill to the site, that's actually a benefit to our plan because it's much cheaper to move it to the adjacent site versus hauling it away. In terms of meeting some stormwater requirements for that future property, that would be on the cost of that property at that time of development. It's pretty consistent with how I've done the business park, where through the land sale process, those costs are recouped. So a little bit of a shared responsibility.
Got it, thank you.
All right, maybe I can piggyback on that too with the tree mitigation.
Go ahead. I was actually going to ask that same question.
So is it still shared by the property owner, the city? How is the tree mitigation? I'm assuming we have to lose some trees in that area.
That's correct. I'll take that one just because I'm familiar with it as long as I'm up here. It is a shared responsibility as well. Anything that was done to meet the regional needs of the area through our stormwater plan, that would be paid for by the stormwater fund, which would be consistent. We will look to replant trees around there to have a landscape plan to try and meet those needs. Anything above that would be paid in, and anything in the future development site, that would be held against that property and paid with time and development.
Thank you. So the way I read it, this might be another question for Ryan, I'm sorry. The way I read it, this is basically putting in place the approvals so that when there's a developer that wants this site, this course of action can be taken. Is that correct? So is this pond going to be moved now or upon, kind of final grading when a developer's at the door? So when are we going to incur the expense of this?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the pond we are going to look to build now because it does at kind of the base level serve a regional need that is in our regional stormwater plan. That's something the city does, and so it's important to expand the pond to meet, there's new rainfall rates, bigger storms, things like that. So that will be constructed now to meet that regional need that we've identified. This plan was completed in 2019. It's a 10-year plan. We update every 10 years. And in 2019, we identified this parcel as needing a larger pond to meet. It really serves the whole business park in essence. So.
And then what about the tree mitigation? Are any trees going to be removed now, or is that going to be development driven?
Mr. Chair, that would be removed now as well. The trees that are in the ponding area and then anywhere we place fill would be removed now. So there was a tree inventory completed by our engineer. So we've identified all of the trees to be removed, and then we can appropriately either replant them or have tree mitigation fees paid either by the stormwater fund or by future developer.
All right, thank you. Additional questions or comment? Seeing none, we will open public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application may do so. Please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we will close public hearing. Further discussion? Seeing none, I would look for a motion.
Motion to approve the preliminary plat 2021-055, subject to conditions in the staff report.
All right, we have a motion to approve, subject to the conditions stipulated in the staff report from Commissioner Rasmussen. Do we have a second?
A second.
I have a second from Commissioner Knable. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item 6.4. Cottage Grove Logistics Park, NorthPoint, cases ZA 21-066, PP 21-067, and SP 21-068, with Emily Schmitz presenting again.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. As indicated, several applications before you on this next item. A minor subdivision, rezoning, a couple of preliminary plats, as well as a master site plan review, all submitted by NorthPoint Development. For those who aren't familiar, the proposed site location is within the city's business park. It is just south of 100th Street. It is actually on the west and east side of Ideal Avenue and just north of the River Acres neighborhood. In order for the developer to create the project area, several parcel adjustments, as I'm going to call them, need to take place before that can happen. One being a minor subdivision, again, an assemblage, a plat of 6 separately owned parcels. So this will be 2 separate plat applications, so I'll go through them just a little bit more in detail. So first would be a minor subdivision. Currently, an 80-acre parcel owned by Mr. Zivic needs to be split into 2 40-acre parcels. The east 40 acres will then be purchased by NorthPoint and included in the assemblage. The west 40 acres will be maintained and owned by Mr. Zivic until such time he is prepared to sell for development. Next, we'll have a preliminary plat of the assemblage. Again, as I've indicated, it's 6 separate property owners that will come together, and this particular preliminary plat will create a new 9 parcels or developable lots and 1 outlot. And finally, a second preliminary plat application. It is the parcel that is to the south of the assemblage area. So I want to make very clear the part of this particular plat that relates to the assemblage in this development is the dedicated 100 feet of right-of-way for the future 105th Street, which is required to be constructed as a part of this development, but we'll get into those details later on. But I just wanted to make clear that that right-of-way is imperative to this development, as well as the outlot that will be created. It is a 75-foot wide outlot that is currently a utility easement. That outlot will be owned and maintained by NorthPoint or the developer long-term. The remaining 2 lots that you see that will be created as a part of this particular plat will continue to be owned by Mr. Julien until such time he has other plans for those lots. So now that we've kind of assembled the proposed development area, it's approximately 252 acres. The entire 252 acres are guided in the 2040 comprehensive plan as industrial. The developer is proposing to rezone all 252 acres to I2, which is general industry, with a planned unit development, which allows for developments if they follow the zoning standards specifically, might not make for the best use of the land or the most practical development. So that PUD or planned unit development allows for a little bit of flexibility as we look at this project as a whole. And additionally, I wanted to make mention that typically a project of this size does require some additional evaluation or review, specifically an AAW or an EIS, which is an environmental assessment worksheet, or sometimes an environmental impact statement. So they do specific review as it relates to historic, cultural, traffic, and environmental impacts for a proposed project. But I want to make note that the city did conduct an AUAR, which is an alternative urban area-wide review, which as a part of that review includes that environmental review. And it's a way to evaluate future potential development ahead of it happening. Essentially a way to market the city's business park and provide, again, more shovel-ready sites. So this was done in 2017. It is good for 5 years, so just wanted to make note that the developer is not responsible for that additional review at this time. And the final request by the developer is a master site plan, which they are calling Cottage Grove Logistics Park. As we look at this site plan as a whole, the 252 acres, 9 potential buildings, which is an accumulative 3.4 million square feet of potential distribution, light manufacturing, warehouse, or office space use. We're looking at this site as a whole. It gives us an idea as the development as a master site plan, as opposed to having several smaller developments come in and try to piece those together. We're able to take a look at this phased development now and make sure that it's meeting all of our minimum standards. That way, as it is phased over time, we can make sure that it's meeting all of those standards that we've set as we look at this master site plan. So again, I want to make very clear, this will be a phased development. Each development will be an individual site plan review. So as part of those site plan reviews, we will look more in detail and more in depth at the parking, building landscaping, more specific to the architecture, and things of that nature. So as we go through the next couple of slides, just keep in mind, we're looking at it as a master plan, so the site as a whole, but we'll get more into the nitty-gritty as the developer provides their phased plans for development moving forward. I also want to make mention that the developer has hosted several neighborhood meetings. So the first they held was in August, where they heard some concerns related to traffic, noise, lighting. So the developer went back to the drawing board and made some adjustments and held a second neighborhood meeting in October, where they provided some adjustments to those concerns to hopefully mitigate for some of those residents that had those concerns. So we'll talk more in depth on the next couple of slides, specific to those items that the developer did adjust. So first, we'll talk briefly about the architecture. The developer is proposing Class A tip-up panels, as you've commonly seen throughout the business park currently. They are proposing some glass and canopies on the corners to break up those facades, as well as some brick accents throughout the long stretches of the building, again, to kind of break that up. We've made clear to the developer that those buildings that are facing that public right-of-way, we would really like to see a variation in architecture. Again, as the developer comes in with their phased site plans, we will look more specifically at those architectural materials. But I think they've provided some good renderings to give an idea of what those buildings might look like. As with all of our residential, commercial, and industrial development, we do require a tree inventory to be conducted. As I've mentioned several times before, it takes inventory of all qualifying trees on a particular site, and therefore then tells a developer how many they're removing and if they do need to mitigate. The developer has conducted a tree inventory on the entire 252 acres of the master site plan area, which has in fact indicated that they do need to mitigate some inches, which we will again evaluate as we look at each site plan as a whole to ensure that over the time as they build out the development that the mitigation is addressed. The applicant has also proposed, as you can see, meeting the zoning code's minimum landscape requirements. Specifically, they've put focus on providing landscaping around the perimeter of the site, understanding full well the need to provide a buffer and kind of mitigate that visual impact from the right-of-way. So they've done a great job in providing some of the renderings that you see before you. I should also indicate they are proposing 10 to 12-foot berming on that north property line along 100th Street, as well as along Ideal on both the east and west side of Ideal Avenue. So these renderings do give a good idea. I do want to make note that this is a 5± year build out, so this landscaping has had time to mature, but I think it gives a good representation of what that site might look like as you see it driving by on 100th Street, Ideal Avenue, and the future 105th Street. In response to some concerns that the applicant had heard at the neighborhood meeting related to noise, they took it upon themselves to inventory, for lack of a better way to put it, the noise on the site as it is today, to get an idea of what that noise might look like once the activity starts on the site. As you can see, the darker the color, the higher the decibels are. So as you can see, those darker colors are more internal to the site. As you move out towards the perimeter or towards the property line, that color starts to get a little bit lighter, which in turn means that those decibels does go down. Just to be sure that the developer is holding, for lack of a better way to put it, the noise on the site, they are in fact proposing a sound wall along that south property line to hold that noise away from the adjacent residential property owners. And I also use this wonderful graphic that the developer has provided, but it gives an idea of what 60 to 65 decibels really is. And it's very comparable to an air conditioning unit within a residential development. So they're proposing at the property line no higher than that 60 decibels. And again, an additional concern that was heard by the developer at these neighborhood meetings was lighting. So they've provided the photometric plan before you. And what we're looking at is this red color. The zoning code restricts light spillage to 1/2 foot candle at the property line adjacent to a residential parcel. So that is most concerning at this south property line, which as you can see, that does not exceed that 1/2 foot candle at that property line. The developer does have access to sanitary sewer right here at my yellow star, which will be extended to the west side of Ideal Avenue as a part of the southwest sanitary sewer extension. There is a water main that runs down Ideal Avenue, so the developer will have access to that water main connection as well. The developer is proposing to manage stormwater on site with privately owned and maintained stormwater basins. In addition, the developer is proposing to build an additional stormwater pond, which will be placed within an outlot that is part of the first phase of development, will be deeded to the city, which leads me to my next slide. The developer is also proposing to dedicate 5 acres of park space, which aligns perfectly with the potential future residential development in the area. The city would accept the 5 acres and construct a neighborhood park. Easy access, again, as I mentioned, for future development, as well as easy access to the existing SNA, which is just adjacent. So a great connection to the city's park area. And with that, I am going to hand it over to our Assistant City Engineer, Amanda Meyer, who is going to take you through more of the specifics of the traffic impacts of the proposed development.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So one of the big topics of discussion as part of this development is, of course, the traffic impacts. So the next couple of slides that you'll see are kind of walking through the proposed public improvements for the adjacent roadways. The city has hired a consultant engineer to complete the design, and then the developer will construct those improvements as part of their phase 1 plan. So we'll start on the south side of this development and work our way north. The first area to highlight is that's highlighted with the yellow rectangle on your screen, which is the 105th Street that Emily has alluded to earlier in this presentation. So looking at the proposed improvements of 105th Street, we're looking at a 3-lane urban section roadway with curb and gutter, trail on both sides, street lighting, landscaping, and a roundabout on the west end. That roundabout at this point just serves a purpose for emergency response vehicles, garbage trucks, plow trucks, et cetera, to be able to turn around within that public right-of-way. At such time, residential developments come through west of here. You can see on your screen the future Hadley Avenue would extend north from that roundabout and be a connection to the northwest, kind of that 100th Hadley intersection. As we move to the east, looking at the intersection of Ideal Avenue and 105th Street, some things to note. So Ideal Avenue today is a 2-lane rural section roadway. On the bottom side of this picture, you can see that transition from a 2-lane section to a 3-lane section. We'd start that curb and gutter at 105th Street and move north, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a couple of slides. But what is important to note specifically at this intersection is we do have designated turn lanes for traffic turning onto 105th Street, allowing vehicles that are heading either straight north or straight south to be sort of separated from that vehicle traffic heading onto 105th Street. So kind of reorientating ourselves, we're going to look next at Ideal Avenue, which kind of separates a portion of this development. As mentioned, Ideal Avenue today is a 2-lane rural section roadway. Looking to expand that roadway to a 3-lane section, allowing for left turn movements in that center lane. There'd be designated right turn lanes as well at the access point that you see in the middle, and I should note north arrow actually points right on the screen. So again, this section is mirrored of 105th Street. So it's that 3-lane section, curb and gutter, street lighting, landscaping, and trail on both sides. Looking then at the intersection of Ideal Avenue and 100th Street. Again, we have the trail, the designated turn lanes to kind of separate traffic going in various directions, either whether you're on 100th Street or on Ideal Avenue. Next, we'll be on the north side of this development, so 100th Street. This is important to note that 100th Street is part of a future county arterial roadway. So as we look at development adjacent to this roadway, we have to take into account right-of-way dedication and spacing requirements of the county to set this roadway up appropriately for that time that the county takes over the road. Existing conditions today of 100th Street. The western portion is more of a 2-lane rural section roadway, and the eastern portion does have curb and gutter. It's striped a bit uniquely in that there's 2 westbound lanes and 1 eastbound lane right in front of that Anderson area. So as we look at the improvements for 100th Street, we would continue to leave the western portion rural, but would widen it to be again a 3-lane section road with right-hand turn lanes. There are some sections that trail is missing on the north side, so we'd look to add that trail through the Hayward Avenue intersection, which is on the top left of your screen. And then add trail along the entire southern portion of 100th Street from Hayward over to Jamaica Avenue. That section of road that does have curb and gutter that is sort of a 3-lane section today, we'd leave it as a 3-lane section, but with pavement modifications and striping modifications, we would look to have the center lane be a left turn lane and then have 1 lane in either direction and those designated right turn lanes where necessary for access. Those pavement and striping improvements, we would continue into the intersection of 100th and Jamaica Avenue. We'd also provide conduit in this roadway to allow for a more efficient implementation of a signal once warrants are met for this intersection. So as it sits today, this intersection is an always stop condition. Warrants are not being met to add a signal, but we'd like to make sure that this intersection is ready for when that time comes. We can add a signal much more efficiently because those improvements would have already been completed as part of phase 1 of this development. So we've mostly covered the improvements that would be completed as part of phase 1 with the exception of the signal. And one other thing to touch on that's more of a future improvement is this blue segment of road that has Bridge 1 highlighted. So the image before you is an exhibit out of the county's Southwest Arterial Study. This was a 2-year study of the county wanting to create an alignment of an arterial roadway to get from Highway 61 down to Gray Cloud Island. This blue segment of roadway was not in the 5-year capital improvement plan for the county. However, with this proposed development and additional discussion with the city, the county has agreed to expedite the construction of that segment. So they have hired a consultant and begun the preliminary design, and the goal is to have the construction of that extension of 100th Street within the next 3 to 5 years. What that does is it helps provide a secondary access point to our business park out to Highway 61. The red circles on your screen are highlighting that interchange of Jamaica Avenue and Highway 61 with those roundabouts. So with the full build out of this proposed development being maybe in 4 to 5 years, with the completion of that blue segment, it does help sort of mitigate some of those traffic impacts. The developer has completed a traffic study as part of their submittal. And one of the conditions of approval is as each phase is completed, they're updating that traffic study so we can continue to monitor each of these intersections and that 61 Jamaica interchange to make sure that these improvements are happening at the appropriate times. So with that, there are quite a few recommendations before you. Staff is here to answer questions, and I know that the developer is also here to provide some more information.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would invite the developer up to add any additional comment.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brent Miles. I'm one of the owners and founders of NorthPoint Development. I'm based in Kansas City. That's where our firm is based. For those of you who may not be familiar with us, really quick as an overview, as I said, we're based in Kansas City. We're about 10 years old, and we're the largest privately held industrial landlord in the U.S. So thank you for having us tonight. I know this is an important project for your consideration, for the city's consideration. Just wanted to give you a little bit of background on us and who you're dealing with, and then obviously we know there will be questions of us and the staff, and we're here to answer those for you tonight. As I alluded to, largest privately held landlord in the U.S. I call it, we're from Staten Island to Sacramento, and this is our first investment in what I'll call the Minneapolis-St. Paul region, and we're excited. We have historically been looking for a site, and you heard some of this today, and we wanted to find a site that had scale, and this has scale. The ability to essentially assemble 250 acres through 6 parcels, 5 property owners was important to us. The AUAR was an important factor for us. Your comp plan, we did all this research before you even know who we were. Those were important to us because that showed us that this was a community that was looking for development, had thought about development in their comp plan and the AUAR and what the city had done. That's important to us. We really believe that capital goes where capital is welcome. 2, as we all know, it's a dynamic market. Obviously, industrial development has taken off. I would say that generally everyone had told us if you're going to the Twin Cities, you should go to Rogers or Shakopee. We did not see that in our data. What we saw was a place that had enough workforce to support a development like this, infrastructure, access to 61, minor things as we dug in, but the extension of that sewer, as was mentioned, that was an important factor for us. Hearing that there's no sewer, but it's off-site and maybe it'll come. I've heard that, I think, every day of my development life. To actually see pipe on the ground and trenches being dug, that's an important factor for us and to sell with certainty. We're speculative developers. We build these buildings without a tenant in mind, and I think sometimes the public doesn't believe that, or there might be a question of why you would do that. And I want to address that head on. We don't know who these tenants are. I will just say these are the types of tenants that these are tenants of ours today. These are types of tenants that we will get this in front of. We don't do that until we get further along in this process with you, because what we don't want to do is ruin our reputation to General Electric or Ford or Patagonia or Adidas, any of those repeat clients of ours. So what we'll do is that we'll go out and we'll market these buildings as we build them. And as you know, the decision-making process has shrunk. So if Patagonia, for example, was looking to locate here, I only say that because I'm wearing a Patagonia vest, but Patagonia was looking to be here, they wouldn't, their decision-making process isn't one where they're trying to pick a site and then you go build the building and then, a year later they move in. They're going to show up and they're going to, they'll have 12 people and they'll say, is a roof on it? When are you delivering steel? And they don't look at anything that isn't already under construction because they want that certainty for their supply chain. We hear it all the time. Every article you read now, every time you try to order something, like me, it's in a boat off Long Beach right now. But that supply chain, this is where supply chain hits the road, right? So how's that container get here? How does it get distributed in this metro? So that's a little bit about us. One other thing that's note, we'll invest about $300 million here. I don't think that goes unnoticed. Anywhere I go, we do projects of this size and scale, but $300 million is a lot of money. And so we're long-term holders. You have two different types of developers, merchant builders, which is I get GE, I sign the lease and I sell the building. We're not sellers, we're long-term holders. So this is something that we look at for a 40 or 50-year horizon. I only bring that up in that the concerns that maybe your staff had brought up or the public had brought up, those are our concerns as well. If you think you're concerned about traffic, we're more concerned about traffic, right? We're more concerned about infrastructure. We can't lease to General Electric or Patagonia and they can't get employees in or trucks in and out, right? We care about being a good neighbor. Landscaping is important. GE, Patagonia, they don't want to anger the residents as a tenant, right? They don't want to hear that, right? So that landscaping buffer, while it seems altruistic that we're trying to just cave to what the staff wants, there is a good neighbor in us, meaning our tenants have to live here for 10, 20, 30 years, maybe longer. They don't want those issues either, right? So berming, landscaping, lighting, traffic, all the things that you hit on in the development, we care about that as well because we're long-term holders and we don't want to screw up this park. I heard in the public things about odor or noxious noise and things like that. Trust me, we do not want that either. If the first person we lease to has a noxious odor, we won't lease another building in that whole park. That's just not what we're spending $300 million on. So I think we have mutually aligned interest. One other thing I'd note is we own our own architecture firm, we own our own engineering firm. So those renderings, that architectural relief, those things, those are all in-house. We went from myself and 5 others 10 years ago to today we have 792 employees. So that is a huge growth projection for us. We're primarily an engineer and architectural-based developer, which is not typical. We're not finance-based developers. We care about the design. We care about that tilt construction. We care about what this looks like for a really long time. So a little bit different park than you've probably seen. Most developers in this general area are not doing parks of this size or scale because they're not typically long-term owners or holders. We look at this as a really long-term investment for us that's going to create somewhere north of 1,500 jobs, 2,000 jobs if you look at the size and the scale of this park. So I'll sit down. I know there'll be questions from you all and the public and myself and Christina and our team. This is our baby. We've been working on it for 4 or 5 months here, and we're excited to, as I've been joking with Christina, you're almost to the starting line.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Questions or comment from the commission?
I have a question for staff.
Commissioner Britton?
I think this is, I think overall the concept looks really well. And I have a question about Jamaica and 100th, which is kind of on the boundary of this, and it might not even be in this actual property, but I can't tell, so I'm going to ask anyway. You mentioned the laying of conduit for future signaling on Jamaica and 100th Street, and I know that we have roundabouts at Jamaica and 61, so I'm curious as why we can't put a roundabout here, and I'm not saying we have to make that decision now because it's probably way down the road, but if there's a potential for having a roundabout here, are we preserving enough space such that if that was something that made more sense than a signal in the long term, that we're not limiting ourselves in this case?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I might actually default this one to our Public Works Director and City Engineer.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, as Commissioner Britton mentioned, we are laying the groundwork for a potential signal. Whenever we do make a real intersection improvement, whether it be a signal or roundabout, that's something we have to justify, work with MnDOT on. So at that time, we would look at, the traffic patterns, what works the best in terms of right-of-way. This is outside the boundaries of the development. So if we wanted to get the right-of-way to construct a roundabout, which would be a very large one, we'd have to work with 3M, who's on the south side, largely to get the additional right-of-way needed for a roundabout. That's certainly something we will not rule out. We want to do what's best for the business park and the users of that area. What's going to have the lowest delay and what's going to work the best for traffic. So we would make that determination at a future date.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that if it happened to have been part of this property, that we weren't limiting ourselves. So thank you for
That's
that
correct.
explanation.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Additional questions or comment before we go to open our public hearing? Commissioner Rasmussen.
Yeah, I've got a question on the detention pond, and maybe it's the scale of this project. I'm having a hard time seeing, but I see a lot of hard surfaces, a lot of roof, a lot of parking, and what seems to be, to me, feels like very minimal detention area. Is this typical for the zoning district, the percentage of holding area versus hard surface?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, see if I can get to a slide that shows that. When you look at the detention ponds, it's, those large green areas between the parking. As of now, that does appear to meet our requirements. They did provide a stormwater management plan. And what's nice is they can infiltrate for the most part in this area. So actually let that water go back into the ground, which is, something the state really looks for. So that does help reduce the overall size of the ponds. But it would be reviewed project by project to make sure they meet all state and watershed requirements.
So are these little green islands between the building, is that detention area as well?
Yep, so those are all detention areas, all highlighted in green, and some of these ponds, and then an additional pond in this area as well.
I have a follow-up question to that. Because this is being divided into 9 parcels, then each parcel, as it's being developed, would have meet its own criteria for stormwater ponding. Because the way it's presented on here, it kind of looks like it was set up that way intentionally. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Each project will have to stand on its own to make sure all stormwater requirements are met.
So as it's phased in, each phase will have its own stormwater ponding allocation. So we're not going to run into any, upfront issues because the remaining plats haven't been developed yet. So this is, as they're phasing this in, each phase will meet all of its own requirements and would potentially avoid any adverse aspects of stormwater ponding and drainage.
Yep, that's correct, Mr. Chairman, as Commission. It is looked at as a whole right now, so they did provide that plan that does meet the city watershed state requirements. So we do know at this master site plan level it meets, and then it would be reviewed project by project to ensure it meets the current requirements of that time. So if requirements change, they'd have to change with it.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions or comment? All right. Before we open public hearing, seeing as we have a good-sized crowd here and we want to respect each other's time, make sure everyone gets an opportunity to voice any concerns or comment they might have, we ask that we limit each participant to 3 minutes. Again, we want to step to the podium if we're going to make any comment, and we would ask that you not repeat if somebody's already asked a question that you intended to ask, maybe set aside your time and make sure we can see that everyone gets an opportunity to speak tonight. So in light of that, I'll go ahead and open public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application may step to the podium. State your name and address for the record, please. If you're in the atrium, you may come on in and step up to the podium and, again, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name's Roger McBride. I'm a resident of the Riverview neighborhood on 113th Street. I don't disapprove of the idea of dedicating this land to industrial and commercial use. I believe this plan is ill there's no vision to this plan. These are monolithic buildings where you're taking 253 acres of farmland and turning it into hard asphalt. I don't see any adequate mitigation of stormwater drainage. The greenery is a joke. It's like putting Christmas boughs on decorating like the renewal plant with Christmas boughs. It's really kind of untenable. It's not really fully realized. If your long-range plan for residential in the plats that are to the south of this unit, there's no segue into residential. The traffic alone is going to create a tremendous inconvenience for the residential things. I mean, you're looking at hundreds of cars, God knows how many semi-trucks. Logistics means semis. There's going to be a tremendous amount of change in traffic. And I don't see any real plan on how to get that traffic moving. You can widen this 110th Street, an ideal, to 3 lanes or another 50 feet, and it's not going to be enough. I really think this developer needs to go back to the drawing board and present you guys with a plan that is not, that is fully realized, and addresses the idea that there's going to be a residential community to the south of this. Anyway, those are my points.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application? Step to the podium.
Hi, good evening. I'm Karen Britton. I live on 113th Street. One question I've always been concerned about our area is emergency response. We're close to Chemelite. We have one road going in and out of that area. And I see 105th, but if something happened in that area to evacuate, that seems like a big concern to have that much traffic on a road that's the only way in and out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Once public comment has concluded, we'll have staff and the applicant address the questions individually in the observance of time.
Good evening. My name is Kate Holscher, and I live on 113th Street South. I'm going to start by saying I'm really disappointed in the city that our neighborhood wasn't involved when this plan came in place. We were notified after there was actually a contract for a sale of this. We were never told that this was going to be an industrial park. It was a surprise. So of course the developer is taking a lot of that burden on that should have been addressed by the city much earlier. My biggest concern at this point, beyond what other people have said, is traffic. And we're talking about the 2 roundabouts on Jamaica and 61 already. The semis there are causing close to accidents all the time. They can't stay in the road. They're taking both lanes, plus they're going up into that center median all the time. It's terrible. We already have renewal by Anderson with a ton of traffic on 100th Street, where it's already hard to turn out of our neighborhood. We have one way in and out. So they're using that as their transportation road. So when we add all of this additional traffic, I'm not seeing how this is going to work. So we need a better traffic plan for this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? Seeing none, we will close public hearing. If staff is able to address some of those statements that were made, or if the applicant has any additional information to add, you may step to the podium. staff needs a moment, we can give you a moment.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so I believe the first question was related to emergency response, how to get traffic in and out. So this might actually be a good picture to start with. As noted, there's a roundabout proposed at the end of 105th Street. The intent is as residential development is proposed west of here and then west of Building 1, which is in the northwest corner of the picture, the developer will be required to build that segment of Hadley Avenue that's missing. So that would provide a secondary access route in and out of this area. Other than that, it is pretty confined to the east of Building 1 and 2 that is land owned by 3M. So land would need to be acquired by 3M and 3M would need to be a willing seller to acquire some land for access east of here. In regards to the last resident with some questions about needing a better traffic plan and traffic concerns with the roundabouts. We do recognize there are some AM and PM peak time traffic slowdowns in those roundabouts. And those are things that we're continuing to monitor and we'll monitor again as each phase of development is completed with those traffic studies to understand the actual loading with each phase. As noted tonight, this is a master site plan. So the phase 1 is unknown at this time. Is it 1 building? Is it 3 buildings? What is that actual loading? So those are things that we definitely would look at further as we fully understand what each phase is of this development. In regards to the guiding, I may look to planning.
And I might actually defer to the developer as they can clarify a little bit more on their development plan and how they plan for the development in the area.
Again, I think the question I heard was, obviously there's an opinion in there about the architecture. I'll probably just try to address that. And what I would say is obviously, I think this is correct from the staff's perspective. The actual architecture will have to come back through this, body. We've tried to, there we go. Obviously, we understand that it is a concrete wall. I personally think they look great. I understand that might be a differing opinion, and that's not me being a smart aleck. I would say that in our design standard, this would be in the top 2% from an architectural relief standpoint. We can provide you through the staff, here's some ideas of how we could break it up more. We don't be insensitive to that. And again, I don't want to keep coming back to this point. We want this to look Class A as well. We're spending $300 million, a little bit more glass, brick, what I call fenestration, really helps break up those concrete tilt walls. We're forming we will form and tilt these panels if anybody has seen that. So we have the ability, as opposed to a precast where it's just made for us, we have an ability to make those forms and that architecture what we want. And we can do that and work through staff in this body to make sure that we're providing brick, glass, and relief. I think those are the things that, really break up those concrete walls. I think one thing that we tried to specifically do, and you saw, and I know you lose scale in this plan, but the idea that especially along 100th and Ideal, we try to keep on those two because those are your two main, transportation routes. You'll notice there's no docks that face those two major streets, right? We try to contain all those, what I'd call in the Tenderloin itself, right? So all the docks in facing as much as possible so that we can provide that architectural relief. There's not much you can do. And again, not slighting the Anderson Renewal Facility, but you see those docks along 100th Street really easy. We try to think through that plan to say, how can we hide those interior so that we can create that architecture and finish in glass as the outside, perimeter, create a perimeter around the whole, primarily where the public eye is.
Thank you, sir. Did we address everything that was stated? Additional questions or comment from the commission? Commissioner Britt?
This is a question for staff. I think one of the comments that was made was in regards to the long-term vision that the city has for this property. Could staff comment on the comprehensive plan and where this area has had vision? What was our last comprehensive plan and where did we see this going in the long term?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So this particular area was guided as part of our review of the 2040 comprehensive plan. So every 10 years, the city does review their long-range comprehensive plan. I was not around at that time, but it's my understanding there was some public engagement, and this particular area was thought to be the best to expand the city's business park, given it is a popular place for development. I think the strategic plan was for this area to be guided for that future and additional business park development. So therefore, that guidance of industrial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Commissioner Fisher?
This might be for the developer and combination, but I'm hearing lots of concerns about traffic and about flow in and out. I was really happy to see that Washington County is going to expedite that arterial road to innovation. I agree with the person who said the Jamaica roundabouts they're unsafe and they're a mess. So my question for you as the developer is, will you kind of scale the rate of development of this property until that full artery is finished?
You want me to take? Okay.
Because I do see the concern for the amount of traffic.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a valid question.
So I'm going to give you my 2 cents, and they may or may not agree. So, how we look at this is a 4-phase build-out. So I know that obviously we master plan the site, right? We're not going to build 3.4 million square feet next year, right? So we know that infrastructure has to happen on 100th, ideal, the 105th extension, and as our phasing comes. So I think what works well, and again, we do this all over the country, I'm not just saying it because they're here, but I think your staff and your plan and the questions you're asking tonight you're going down the right path, right? Which is each one has to come back for your approval. You'll do that updated traffic study. You always have the safety and security of we don't get approval, right, if the infrastructure isn't correct. I would say generally, we are looking, our traffic study that's going on right now with the city's consultant, and then obviously that interaction with the state and the county, we're specifically looking at that level of service that's happening around those roundabouts. You've driven it, I've driven it, we know that the level of service is not the best today, and what is our impact on that? And so that's what we're really looking at. I think if you look back at what our ultimate, I think it would be the city and ours is, where do we get that 100th Street extension? How do we look at that infrastructure over to innovation and other relief valves? But again, all this won't happen at once. And then that becomes a timing and funding question, right? And so that's where I think we're working with them on a phased approach. This building generates X, this building generates Y, and really looking at that for the long term. We know that we don't have that issue today in phase one. We do know that when this is built out, we will all have to address that level of service. So I will tell you candidly, your staff is most interested in making sure that the transportation works here. We're interested in that as well. The engineers are comparing those notes and those studies and those models right now. So you'll see that ultimate outcome at this body, right? What are those improvements? What is necessary? And we know that we will be governed, for lack of a better term, in the bureaucratic sense and the traffic sense, we will be governed by infrastructure. So I hope that answered your question.
Mr. Miles, I have a question related to so on the commission, we see these types of applications often, and we can appreciate the depth and the length of time that it takes to bring these applications to this forum.
Mm-hmm.
But to I believe it was maybe Karen who stated, or Kate that had stated, you know, they weren't notified of this until after, you know, an agreement was already in place. Could you maybe just speak to the length of time in the process and why there's an agreement with the property owner prior to you guys bringing this application to us?
Again, not to be argumentative, I think that it would be an error to do it in the opposite.
No,
Yeah.
I understand the
Yeah.
process. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to bring some clarity to what your company's process is
Yeah.
for the full depth of your, you know, your process for
Sure.
bringing these things to application.
Yeah, understood. So, you know, as I said, there's 6 parcels, 6 properties under contract. We haven't closed on any of them, right? That's pending. We don't close until we get approvals. 5 owners. Because they're in the room, this is meant as an affection, we were herding some cats. You know, will one agree, will the other agree? So that's where that assemblage, and that took months to get that assemblage. What is our park? What is the size of our park? And I would say that it was ever-changing. How will we develop this? What phase? And who is in and who is out? And so that took some time to do. We got it under contract. We did the first neighborhood meeting, I think was in August. We try to do that. I don't know, somebody can correct me. I don't know if you have a city requirement for a neighborhood meeting. Is that a no?
We recommend.
You recommend strongly. There's not a requirement for a neighborhood meeting, but just as a company, as a policy, we do not want the first time that these folks meet us is at the podium. That's bad form. For those of you who don't know me, I came from the public side, and I would never recommend that. So we did that first meeting in August and really tried to hear feedback. And I think we had 48, 50 folks at the first meeting in August. We changed the plan, as you heard. Some of that was setbacks, buffering, landscaping, lighting, a combination of things. Then we had that second meeting, I think it was the first week of October, 2 weeks ago. And I think we had 28 folks. Obviously, you can see how many folks are here tonight. So it's an iterative process for us. I do note that I think the mailing, I think we exceeded the requirement for mailing too. We've just done this enough to say, you know, why didn't you notify this neighborhood? You obviously have a city code that requires a certain, we tried to extend that and try to be as open through the process as possible, just because we really want to try to get as many of those issues worked out before this body happens tonight. If that answers your question.
That was the in-depth answer I was looking for.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions from the commission? Commissioner Frazier?
So this is a question for staff. It's gonna be about whether the site plan has been reviewed by public safety for comments about whether it meets their requirements for fire engine access and things like that. I'm assuming yes, because I heard about 105th and how they're gonna have the roundabout at the end to be able to have public works vehicles turn around and fire trucks turn around there. But I just wanna know, did public works or did public safety have an opportunity to review the site plan as a whole, this master site plan, or are they going to be reviewing each individual piece as it comes through?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Frazier, Public Safety and Public Works both reviewed this master plan, and they will also be involved in the review of any of the phased site plans as well, to make sure that any public safety concerns are absolutely addressed and reviewed as a part of those site plan reviews, phased site plan reviews.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Knable?
I just have another question for staff. Was it looked at from Jamaica down to Innovation for any kind of road improvements besides kind of right there at the Miller Road Innovation, like the whole road in general, just to open that up to more lanes to help ease some of that traffic flow?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, in terms of looking to the east of Jamaica, the real focus is to get that 100th Street extension directly out to Highway 61. That's really what we see as the best mitigation and providing that secondary route. You know, the county really has I will say stepped up because that study they did was just completed. And when they did that study, I think they were thinking at least 10 years out for that roadway. And it's largely a county cost to build that roadway. So for them to kind of accelerate that and look to build that extension is very important for this entire area of the city. So that's really the focus, for improvements for this project. In the interim, we are going to look at Miller Road. We have met with 3M just to talk about this project, and maybe there's some improvements down at that intersection if some traffic goes that way, but the real focus is to get that 100th Street extension completed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Rasmussen?
I think a lot of our conversations and concerns is related to traffic, and, I'm very interested in 100th Street being finalized and this being phased with the county road, but I'm real curious, how many parking spots are on this site? I'm not that used to looking at 252 acres. You mentioned maybe 1,500 employees, so I'm guessing around that number of parking stalls, but we got a lot of tractor trailer parking as well. What can the total site hold once it's all built out?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Rasmussen, I'll answer from a staff perspective as it relates to the zoning code. I'll be honest, I don't remember specifically how many proposed parking stalls they are proposing, but I do know that it meets the minimum requirements. I believe we require one space for 2,000 square feet of building square footage. So they are meeting that on site. And again, I can clarify that as part of the specific phases and those site plan reviews will really hone in on the required parking stalls, not only for passenger employees, but also truck and trailer parking as well on those sites. So we'll really hone in on those again as part of those phased developments.
Thank you. Yep. You can just state your name and state your name again for the record.
Again, it's Brent Miles with NorthPoint. You lose scale, so we get that. So it has 2,300 car park. Someone say, well, why do you say 1,500 to 1,700? We really look for that swell of shift change. So as I say, I don't know, I think I get told I can't say anymore. You build the church for, you don't build a church for Easter, but we do build it for Sunday. And that overlap. And so we want to be cognizant of that. The other thing I would say is that 1,500 to 1,700 employees, if you look at the size of site, we just use a data analytic when we did your labor study, and you'd say per 1,000 square feet of building, you should expect X amount of employees for there. I also think that you probably will be closer to that 2,000, but I'd rather set the bar a little bit lower than higher with expectation. But I think on a bad day, it's 1,500, 1,700. So we use an ITE. So I don't know how in-depth you get in these, but we'll do an ITE study of that truck and car park and that split between the two, and that's what's dictating the traffic study and model. They'll pull the number of docks, the size of the building. So trailer parking, you usually have about 1 per 10,000 is what it equates out to be.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Additional question? Seeing none, I would look for a motion. However, there are 5 applications on this, so motions will go individually for each of the 5 applications. I'll look for a motion and then a second, and then we'll have further discussion on each one of these motions. So if there's no further general discussion. Public hearing has been closed. Unfortunately, Robert's rules would prevent us from moving forward there. However, you can take an opportunity to speak to staff, and they can make sure that your question is addressed. As they've stated previously, this is a preliminary plat, so nothing has been done yet. All of these applications are going to come before us again, and you'll have another opportunity for public hearing at that time. And also at the city council, thank you.
I was just going to reference, Chair, that anybody who is here is welcome to attend the December 15th City Council meeting, where this item again will reappear before the City Council for consideration, and there'll be an opportunity then for people to speak as well.
All right, thank you. All right, so general discussion on the applications before we move into motions.
Over here.
Commissioner Wright.
Thank you to staff. That's very in-depth as far as like the noise levels. Like, I mean, you guys have gone out of the way to do your homework on this, to try to answer any of the questions that they have. I encourage the public to stay involved with this. Again, this is, you hear the reoccurring thing is that this is phased. It's not everything happening overnight. So your input is being heard, it's being considered. So just stay involved in the whole process, because it's not going to be an overnight process, so.
And am I correct that as there are continued phases, the applicant will continue to have neighborhood outreach?
Yes. Yeah, and I'll maybe take it a little bit further. We have two members of our team here tonight, Jamie and Jessica. They're actually on our team that implements what we call our good neighbor policy. So even as construction goes, there'll be continued updates. Like, obviously, we'll interact heavily with the city in terms of roadway. You know, we're going to be doing a lot of construction, but just people don't like the surprise of I woke up and they're building a building. And so just that constant communication of this is what you can expect when, and just how we keep that open line of communication, phone numbers, things like that. You know, things happen. People will have, there will be, I'll guarantee you, there will be a popped tire, there will be a dirty car. Those things happen, and we want to make sure that we're good neighbors in that, and that, you know, we provide that feedback. So it's continued between you, but mostly with the neighborhood.
All right, thank you. All right. On the first item, or section 1 of the application, minor subdivision of 80.26 acres of land into two 40.13 acre parcels. I'll look for a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion to approve, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report from Commissioner Fisher. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Wright. Further discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
In reference to subsection 1, motion carries. Item 2, zoning amendment to rezone 252 acres of land within the proposed assemblage from AG1 and AG2 to I2 General Industrial with a PUD planned unit development. I'll look for a motion.
Motion.
I have a motion to approve, subject to this conditions outlined in the staff report from Commissioner Knable. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Britton. Further discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Item 2, motion carries. Item 3, Cottage Grove Logistics preliminary plat creating 9 parcels and 1 outlot. I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve item 3, park preliminary plat,
Subject to
subject to stipulations.
conditions as outlined in the
Conditions.
staff report.
Absolutely.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Fisher. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries on item 3. Julian preliminary plat creating 2 parcels, 1 outlot, and 1 right-of-way of future 105th Street. Looking for a motion.
Motion to approve, subject to conditions and staff report.
We have a motion to approve, subject to this conditions outlined in the staff report from Commissioner Rasmussen. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Britton. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. On item 4. On item 5, master site plan of for proposed construction of approximately 3.4 million square feet of warehouse, light manufacturing, distribution, and office space. I'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve the site plan, subject to conditions in the staff report.
I have a motion to approve, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Wright. Further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries on item 5. That's that. I'd like to thank everyone for your time tonight and your comment. And again, you said December 17th is when the city council meeting is? Is that correct?
December 15th.
December 15th at 7 PM is when this application will be before the city council. Moving on to item 6.5, MRCCA Ordinance Amendment Case TA 2021-019. The city is asking that we postpone this hearing until our meeting on November 22nd, 2021, so that the city has additional time to research the zoning code and make sure that it's ready to go. This will be a simple motion. I'll look for a motion to approve. And that would be tabling that until our November 22nd meeting.
Motion to table to the next meeting.
I've got a motion to table the item until our November 22nd meeting from Commissioner Wright. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Fisher. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. On to item 7, approval of Planning Commission minutes of September 27th, 2021. If there are no objections or alterations, I would look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Fisher, Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Wright. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. On to item 8, reports. 8.1, recap of October city council meetings.
Planning Commission Chair and fellow Planning Commission members, I'll go over the October City Council meetings. In regard to the October 6th City Council meeting, there were 2 public hearings. One was a Hinton Woods easement vacation, as well as Oppidan had 2 easement vacations that appeared on their site. Those were approved. And then on the regular agenda was the Views by Palai Builders, was approval of their application for the multifamily market rate 31-unit apartment building that was just north of the Oppidan project. And then in regards to the October 20th City Council meeting, the septic variance at 8401 River Acres Road was approved by City Council as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Councilmember Dennis for any additional comments.
All right, thank you, Director Costello, and good evening, everyone. Before I open myself up to any questions that you might have, I do want to mention that next week, Tuesday, November 2nd, is an election day here in the city of Cottage Grove. And no matter where you may come down on this particular issue, we do have a referendum before the community for a community center. And so, generally speaking, when we look at off-year elections, we end up with somewhere between 6 to 13% of the voting population that actually comes in to cast a vote. So my request to the community tonight is twofold. Number one, in addition to the community center, there are also school board members that are up for election and two school board referendums. So the one ask that I have is that people take the time to do a little bit of research and be able to cast an informed vote if they decide to show up and exercise their right. And number two is that we get as many people as possible to weigh in on these subjects because they are very important to the overall current and future of our community. So that's my statement on that. And then I see Mr. Frazier is smiling. He is an attorney, so when I see a smile, I know I did well. I will open myself up to any questions that you may have of me.
Thank you, sir. Questions for the council member?
All right, well, thank you. I'd like to be off the hook.
Good job.
And as always, I'd like to thank you all for your service here to our city. Thank you.
Did we have any planning commission inquiries from our last session? No? Do we have any planning commission requests for staff? I don't think so. I would like to commend staff and the public for coming here tonight, and I think this was a very well prepared application. I think having attended one of those neighborhood meetings and seeing the volume of questions that the staff was up against, I think they did a really good job preparing all of these applications tonight and really making sure that we're well informed so that we can make a good decision as well. So, thank you again. On to item 9. If there's no further comment, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I have a motion to adjourn from Commissioner Wright. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Knable. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. We are.